September 11 attack on the World Trade Center was an historical turning point for America and the world, but as the US prepares to commemorate the 9th anniversary of that defining moment, a dispute over plans for an Islamic cultural centre and mosque just 2 blocks from the site is challenging some of the country's most fundamental rights and expectations. All Americans have a constitutional right to freedom of religion, but many believe such an overt expression of Islam is unacceptable so close to Ground Zero. Supporters say the centre will help build bridges between Muslims and other Americans, but the opposite may be more likely. North America correspondent Michael Brissenden reports from New York.
New York, liberal, flashy, decadent and culturally eclectic. There's no other city in America quite like it. But there is one place here that is claimed by the entire nation.
You know, my son is one of the 1,100 people who remain missing at the World Trade Center. Most unfortunately, I don't know Christian's story of that day. I've never been told what happened to him.
My stepson was Scott Capico. Also, he was on the 78th floor in the South Tower. My understanding that he was vaporized. That's what they tell us. Never to be found. No traces of him at all.
9 years on, the emotional and physical scars of the 9/11 attacks are still raw. But now, plans for an Islamic centre that will include a mosque just 2 blocks from Ground Zero are testing the limits of the Constitution and the perceptions Americans have of their own nation. The site has become a cultural and political fault line that is dividing the country.
This is Jordan Sekulow live in Washington, D.C. Today on the broadcast, author Andy McCaffrey will join us. And did you know the developers behind the Ground Zero Mosque don't even own the site they want to destroy?
Jordan Sekulow hosts a syndicated radio show that reaches millions of people across the country every day. He's just one of many outspoken broadcasters and public figures opposed to the development.
At this site, I think it's in bad taste, and these developers brought the attention on themselves. This imam's called the United States an accessory to the 9/11 attacks, say that we are responsible for creating Osama bin Laden. If that's the face of moderate Islam and that the American Muslims are putting forward, I think it reinforces, unfortunately, many of the concerns and issues that people have here in the United States with Muslims.
As the controversy has swirled and escalated over the last few weeks, the imam heading the development has been touring the Middle East. His only comment so far has been to reiterate the peaceful intent of Islam. But other Muslim leaders here have been far more outspoken.
This is a controversy that was manufactured by the cottage industry of anti-Muslim bigots out there who will seek any issue to marginalize American Muslims and demonize Islam. What they're trying to do is exploit the natural emotions generated by the 9/11 terror attack.
Muslims make up just 2% of the population in the US, but in Greater New York, they are one of the fastest growing demographics. And many of them commute to Manhattan to work. Locals like Azeem say there's enormous demand for a cultural centre like the one proposed.
We already have about 200 mosques in New York City, and they grow every day because our community is growing. Our community is always on the move due to the nature of being in New York City. And we don't have a center where we have recreational things, where we have the arts and programs.
Mosque developments are meeting resistance in many parts of the country, but none has attracted the publicity of this one. And Azeem is just one of many who see the opposition to this cultural centre as a fundamental test of American principles.
That's the biggest proof to show that this is a case of a rise in Islamophobia. It's people playing on others' fears and on their sensitivities for their own agendas. And those agendas are not helpful to America or our future, and they don't stand in line with what we really believe in as Americans.
Across America, public opinion has swung vehemently against the construction of any form of Islamic centre or mosque at this site. But what is interesting is that polls show the closer you actually get to this place, the more accepting the public is of the development plan. And many of them believe just as passionately that to block it would itself be a victory for the terrorists. One of the most passionate of all is the Jewish mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg.
Let us not forget that Muslims were among those murdered on 9/11, and that our Muslim neighbors grieved with us as New Yorkers and as Americans. We would betray our values and play into our enemies' hands if we were to treat Muslims differently than anyone else.
But this project has begun to resonate far beyond New York and into the broader cut and thrust of contemporary American politics.
This is a slap to those innocent victims who were murdered that day on 9/11.
What you're doing is, in fact, offensive to most of the families who lost people at 9/11.
Republicans like Sarah Palin and Newt Gingrich have come out strongly against it, as have some Democrats facing tough fights for re-election in the coming midterm elections.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Please have a seat.
And although he later said he wasn't commenting on the wisdom of building a mosque at Ground Zero, President Obama's initial foray into the debate seemed unequivocal.
Americans, let me be clear. As a citizen and as president, I believe that Muslims have the right to practice their religion as everyone else in this country. And that includes the right to build a place of worship in a community center on private property in Lower Manhattan in accordance with local laws and ordinances. This is America.
I was rather taken aback by President Obama. I voted for him. I'm a big supporter of his. When I heard his comments, I was very, very taken aback. I was really shocked.
Sally Regenhard describes herself as a lifelong Democrat. Over the years, she's become one of the leading voices for the families of the victims of the attack. Not all of them are opposed to the Ground Zero Mosque, but she says the overwhelming majority of them are.
They could reach out for years afterwards and not accomplish as much as they would if they would just move this mosque right now, reaching across cultural and religious divides.
Where would you like them to move it to?
Certainly out of the spectre of Ground Zero.
Jim McCaffrey and Russell Mercer also lost relatives that day. They say they're not anti-Muslim, but they do believe this development is inappropriate. They also think there's little chance such a controversial project will ever get built.
I don't think the construction workers in this city will build that building. I think there'll be demonstrations down there, there'll be strikes down there, they'll be protesting that building. The construction workers in the United States are very loyal union personnel.
There are now some indications that the developers are prepared to compromise. A relocation is now being actively canvassed. But for many American Muslims, the Ground Zero project has become more than just a cultural centre and a mosque.
Once you start taking away people's rights, it's a very slippery slope. I think it's very important that it does go ahead because it'll send a message that America is an inclusive society. And on the other hand, if bigots are able to stop it, what message does that send? It sends a message that America is becoming an intolerant society, and that's not the message we want to send to the rest of the world.